Hello everyone. I hope everybody has a great coffee and a nice break. So let's move on to the third track of the day. And on in this track, we have a couple of session on the API life cycle. With the said that, let's welcome the Saileja. Yeah. Yeah. Hi Saileja.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, so Shailaja is a principal product manager at the Harness, and she's going to talk about the building effective API marketplace with the Federation.
Thanks Shreya. I hope I'm audible loud and clear. Shreya, am I good to continue?
Yes, you are.
Okay, then. Thank you, and a warm welcome from my side. Good afternoon, everybody. I would be briefly covering about how to build an effective API marketplace with Federation, and meaning when we say effectiveness, how effective can the APIs reach your consumers, right? That's what the presentation is intending today. And as part of today's talk, what would I be covering is a brief introduction of myself, and then we jump into the topic directly. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Shalaja. I'm currently working as a principal product manager at Harness, which is a DevOps platform. And I've been have a wealth of experience building catalogs, API marketplaces in my prior experience with SAP as well, and in my current work experience, right? So with this experience is what I would be really presenting a key pattern with which all of you can elevate your API marketplace to the next level. Now, what is that we will be taking as a key takeaway today is that we understand what's a marketplace, what's an API catalog, what are the types of the different API marketplaces, and how it has been evolving so far, and what is the key challenges today with respect to an API catalog and a marketplace, right? And we will walk through with examples, identify what's our key challenges, and then finally solve that with a pattern that is the catalog segmentation pattern, and that's how effective a API catalog can become, right? That's something that is something that I would be sharing. And finally we would talk about Federation, if time permits, of how different flavors of catalogs can be mixed and matched, right? So that's in a nutshell what we would be covering. And let's move on, understand what's an API catalog and a marketplace, right? Now, we have all been using different API catalogs, and I think one of the key elements of this track as well as the API lifecycle is that we all heavily use the API catalog, and then we try to consume the different APIs and take it to the next level in terms of our application building and so on, or let it be an integration, whatnot, right? So um, we all know that way API catalog is the collection of APIs, and it could be something more as well. Let's say if it's your apps who's just consuming APIs as well, that's a different segment that could also be there as part of your API catalog. And meaning essentially what are we trying to do is that we are trying to share APIs for our for public consumption, for our organization, for our end users who want to build their own dimensions and share it with their consumers. Now, API marketplace is one level more than API catalog. We could use these terms synonymously, but what API marketplace is something which is adding more value, a collection of all APIs with which you can deliver some intent or a business process and so on with monetization, right? Now, now let's also understand what is that the key characteristics of API marketplace, right? Now, the first and foremost, what's the key characteristics that needs to be there is that there has to be an easy discovery based on the needs, right? When we say based on the needs, let's say I want to build a business process, let's say I want to look for something very specific for an industry. I as a persona who's using the API marketplace should be able to quickly go and dive in and get based on my needs. And then as a next key characteristics that we would um, want to also do is that search and explore, understand the API. Let's say from an API perspective, what are the input structures? What is the output response structure? How can I consume that? And what are the error codes? And so on, right? And first and more important is that what is that which is the business intent that it is trying to solve? What is the problem that this API is trying to solve, and so on. Now, so which means there has to be a wealth of explore experience as well, and that's the next key characteristics of an API marketplace. And finally, after consuming, it just doesn't stop there. It needs to be consumed in different test environments for us to take it to the next level and consume the API, right? So with these key characteristics, that's is very, very important for an API marketplace. And we are at this point in time in a junction of with different marketplaces evolving. We are in a junction where we are kind of reaching to these key characteristics, right? Now, let's also understand where are we at this point in time with different API catalogs in the market. Now, what is that I will be doing at this point in time, and what I will be sharing with all of you is to kind of take different examples. And finally, we will also try have a problem with a persona and try and see how a well-formed API catalog can solve that problem for us, right? Now, quickly to recap or kind of summarize what we saw all along is what's an API marketplace, what are its key characteristics, and we are at this point in time, what's the evolution, right? So, meaning at a very first point, we all needed for our digital transformation needs an API catalog. So we started with a very simple vanilla catalog, right, where there is a collection of APIs, and it's just ordered in the timestamp of when it has been published into a catalog, and it's just sequenced that way, right? So that's a very, very simple vanilla catalog. We will also shortly look at that example. And moving on, what we all understood is that, hey, just by having a vanilla catalog and ordering it based on how it was published is something that's kind of limiting. We also need to move on to a next level, and that's when the catalog started having little more simple grouping, categorization, and so on, which are like standard categorizations based on the business needs of that particular catalog and so on, right? So then there was an evolution that kind of led to the simple grouping. Now we are at this juncture where we are at a grouping level. There are some fixed groupings and grouping it, and then with that we are able to consume for a bit group, right? Essentially, when you get into the group, there's again a lot of APIs which are going to be there, and you need to go into the next level to kind of further identify, fix it to your needs, and so on. So now, as we saw, the key characteristics is to kind of discovery based on needs. Now that's where we are at this point in time, where the API catalogs are evolving and have to give a key discovery based on the needs of our users, right? So we are at this juncture, and that's what we are going to see. How are we going to reach there, and how can we easily build that discovery based on business needs? And that's where the catalog segmentation pattern is going to come in. Now, before we get into that, let's look at these vanilla catalogs and a simple grouping catalog for us to appreciate how does it look like, right? So I have taken a simple catalog, which is APIs Guru, which you see here. This has a wealth of APIs. As you see, there are 2K APIs, and as you see here, it's simply grouped as a simple collection, and it is grouped based on the order of the publishing date. When I say publishing date, when did it come into the catalog, and so on. Now, of course, you will all agree at this point in time, hey, I have this collection, I have to definitely search further and then kind of deep dive more and more to get what I want. So the discovery is kind of having a limited experience, right? Now, here, maybe as a next step, if I had some platform APIs grouped together, let's say as a type based on technical types, REST APIs, and at least based on products, if it is grouped, that would have been a little one step ahead for us to consume. Now, that's where next example that I wanted to show was the API list. Let's look at the API list. API list is kind of one level more, where it kind of has a grouping. We will shortly see that grouping. Oh, yeah. So as you see here, there are groupings and a little more richness that comes in with different dynamics that is being added, and then filtering and so on, right? To also, meaning, let's also look at another catalog, which is the API Setu catalog, which is the Government of India's catalog, right? So if you see this, we have the API directory and how can we get in and so on. This is the catalog of supported by the Government of India. Let's get into the API directory, and what you see here is different categories, right? Now, of course, I think that rings a bell, saying, hey, I could quickly get into one of the education or one of these and get into more what I want. So this is the second level of evolution that we are in. But let's say at this point in time, if you have a specific use case that you want to solve and you have a business need, we are still not there, right? So we still need to kind of hunt for it. Let's take an example with this catalog, right? A use case. Now, I, as a citizen of India, I am using vehicles and the transports and the infrastructure provided. Now, I really want to know what are all the compliances that I have to meet, and have I done that? Do I have my registrations of my different vehicles and so on, right? So that's one of my use cases that I wanted to quickly come and identify and consume, because then I have an app that I'm going to build to kind of expose all this for my consumers. So can I do this coming in? Yes, of course you can do it, but then you have to search, you have to go deep dive and so on, right? So that's exactly what we're going to solve. And we will also see how the exact problem that we just talked about will be solved by this pattern. So getting back, yeah. Now, what are all the challenges that we talked about? To summarize, we of course said, hey, there is discovery, but there is no discovery based on use cases or my business needs. And there is a flat collection, and I cannot get the APIs based on my intent. And then I cannot also not monetize based on a particular business case that I have developed for a particular API. So I need a different kind of a discovery to exactly cater to this needs. Now, why would that need also arise, right? Meaning there are different personas who are having different catalog needs. And when it comes to an API catalog, of course, there are different personas. And it's very important. And with my experience of building API marketplaces, I've understood it's very, very important that you cater to all the different personas who come into your catalog. And particularly in an API marketplace, let's kind of look at a flavor of overall the personas from an API marketplace, right? Now, let's take a sales expert who would want to kind of identify the problem API for a problem statement during a customer discovery, and then quickly, hey, says, hey, these are the APIs that's being exposed to my product, and so on, which also kind of makes the selling easy, because then that's like a candidate that you could use to quickly showcase your products and so on. And an enterprise architect is the next persona who's kind of key person who drives the building of the particular business process or a particular application, a microservice and whatnot, right? So they are at this point in time, let's say they have to integrate with different products, have to use the APIs, they have to come into the marketplace, need to identify the products with which, let's say, they have to integrate. Let's say they have to integrate two products and they have to use the APIs. They have to come and understand with respect to a product dimension, right? And then nail it into it, and also a little more in terms of the technical deep dives of the type of the APIs and what it supports and so on. So that's a different need, and that's a different dimension that we just saw. A sales expert would look like more from a business case. An enterprise architect would look at it from a kind of a technical requirement, for an example, the integration scenario that we talked about. And finally, a developer, of course, needs to understand the API in a lot more fine-grained manner. And so as we see here, there are different personas who are at this point in time having different needs. Now, how do we cater all these needs? How do we make the discovery easy? That's what, right? Now, what normally goes behind in a catalog when you have to enable such a discovery based on a simple grouping? So this is what we saw. It is a catalog with APIs in the order of updation. Next is simple groups and categories. What goes behind to enable a simple group and category, right? You have to manually curate all the groups and then start connecting APIs. And as and when newer APIs comes in, you have to associate the APIs with your existing groups and so on. And you need to understand the business semantics of the APIs that comes in every time. You, as an administrator of the catalog, is kind of heavily having a delta of work, understanding the API, putting it into the collection, making the catalog updated. Else it has a risk of becoming stale and not updated, right? So there requires a dedicated administrator persona, or a kind of a curator persona who has to do this. And imagine if this particular catalog is going to handle a volume of APIs, it's just going to kind of make it impossible to do it. Now, and of course, it's a simple grouping that we talked about. Let's say if it has to be a complex business case and so on, and a business need, it's simply not that easy to do it, right? Now, what we wanted to achieve is that how can we overcome these challenges, right? That's when we wanted to share this key pattern. We can segment the catalog and on auto curate in the API marketplace and present it to our users, with eliminating this manual effort that we just talked about, and making the catalog into the next evolution as well. Now, now with building an effective API marketplace with segmentation pattern, now let's understand what does that segmentation means, right? Now, what can I segment? How can I segment? Now, the segmentation has to happen based on some key semantics. The semantics can be as many based on the marketplace um, owner or the marketplace that you want to build and your business needs. A simple example, or the very key three simple semantics that I wanted to present, is that take the persona that we talked about, based on the persona, the needs and the output of what they want, right? So the key semantics, and with that we can segment the catalog and then present it, and this makes the catalog dynamic as well. So let's say me as a user, I come in and select these are my personalization preferences, right? Then you can quickly segment the catalog, because you've already you can present the segments very easily because the segments are already being built at the back. Now, this is like a background process that happens, and an auto building of all these segmented collections based on the available metadata of the APIs, right? Now, the key input for all these segmentation is the metadata. And um, now, what does that metadata means, right? It's kind of sounds a little technical, but that's actually describing the API. Let's say we call it as attributes, and that describes the APIs, saying what does it do, what does it belong to, who is it catering for, what business needs, and so on. And these could be as many with for us to use and segment the catalog. Now, this becomes the key input, and with that is what we will segment the catalog. Now, let's take an example of the different metadata or the attributes. It could be the business case, the processes that it is associated. Let's say, to give you a simple example of a business case, let's say I'm building an employee onboarding scenario, then I need those dimensions to be presented in the business case and the processes. And then with that, it's possible to link to an employee onboarding collection, right? And what industry does it belong to, products, countries, and it could be as many, right? So these are some key examples of the semantics with which we could segment the catalog, and these semantics are something that needs to be provided by the publisher of the API. So the catalog has to enable saying, hey, publish all these information, and we would segment the catalog and present it based on what our consumers want, or what does our providers also want in the catalog. Now that we know these are the semantics is important, now how do we get into the segmentation based on the metadata and the attributes, right? Now, let's look into the step-by-step approach of the segmentation. So there are some key APIs that have come in by the providers. They also wanted to present it in such a way. So you have to identify the business dynamics of the segmentation, identify, hey, these are the attributes with which you have to segment, and we initiate the auto groups and identify the segmentation. So there could be as many combinations of segments that could get generated based on the combination of attributes that we generate. And then finally, these segments are suggested and presented for review. So now the catalog administrator decides, saying, hey, out of these segments, what is my key user wants, and then decides and releases these segments. So this is the process in which how the segmentation happens. To also well appreciate, let's look at the personas who are actually involved and how do they do it, right? We talked about how the auto curation happens. Now, the auto curation is a process or a background job which constantly looks at your catalog, builds the segments, and releases it, right? That's what we just saw. Now, who is involved in this process? How are they going to benefit? Now, we all know publishers who are coming into the catalog and saying, hey, these are my APIs, take it to the public for consumption, right? That's where they come to the marketplace. They come in, they provide the APIs, add content to the catalog with the metadata. So we talked about the semantics, where that's the metadata. And then what does the auto semantic collector does is that builds all these segments and presents it to an administrator for the visibility. Now, once this is available, the administrator takes a first look, kind of screens the segments which are definitely adding value, and then notifies to the publisher saying, hey, these are segments that we want to present in the catalog with your APIs. We want to also combine these things and present these business needs and so on, which makes it also candid for the publisher to solve and take it to the market and solve their needs. With that, the cycle completes, and then it goes into the marketplace for release, right? Now that's the catalog segmentation auto curation pattern, right? That's something that's going to solve our problem and take the catalog to the next evolution. So yeah, now let's also look at some little more fine-grained details in terms of the APIs, the metadatas, and how they are associated. As you see here, there are different APIs here, and there are different metadata objects also associated. Just to appreciate, a metadata can look like this, right? So if you have a metadata object one, and to now let's come back to the problem statement that we had with respect to the vehicle insurance of how from the API Setu marketplace that we wanted to look up, right? I'm the persona of a citizen, and I'm this app is being built, and I'm looking for this persona, these APIs from a vehicle domain, and from with respect to vehicle dynamics and the domain of industry, right? Now, what is the output that they want? The report of the vehicles and the insurance and so on, right? Now, let's also look at go back to the let's go to the API Setu marketplace. Now, let's say this is the Setu marketplace, and I quickly search for vehicle. Yes, I of course get a lot of vehicle related APIs right here. I get to see my registration of my vehicles and so on. And now, but of course, let's say I have to look at specifically for my state and for two-wheelers or the four-wheelers that I own and so on. That's a separate search that I have to do. And if let's say if it is insurance, then I have to do a separate search. So now, as you see this, right, you have to go into it, search for it, and group it. Now, with this segmentation, what we see is that this is going to happen with the right metadata that's being provided. Now, let's look at this is the metadata, and let's look at how would it look like, right? There would be different collections based on the metadata attributes A1 based on on an entity or an object or a persona. Here we have taken some virtual personas like a student and a validate use case and an education domain saying the board of education. Likewise, I could group it based on as many metadata attributes, and you see as many collections that could be built, right? And these are all virtual collections which are just going to get presented after approval of the collection or the segment that we call. So, a plain vanilla catalog in this API Setu marketplace we just saw, right? It was, we had it. You had based on the collection and some simple groupings, right? Now with the segmentation pattern, what are the advantages that we get, right? A rich catalog grows from a plain vanilla collection, and you see this constantly as APIs comes in, the catalog grows, and the business growth is enabled by enabling new segments of collections. Let's say you target a different business segment in your entire businesses, then the API catalog is automatically going to reflect it. There's no extra effort, and the personas can quickly come in and identify and get to nail their use cases, right? And finally, what you can also do is the federation. Let's say you have different marketplaces, you could all federate from these different marketplaces by hooking on to these virtual collections, right? So that's in a nutshell what we achieved. And in this case of the add-on of vehicle insurance that we wanted to achieve, we would have a pattern like this, right? We will have an insurance pattern, and we get into it, we will see the next collection. Hey, you are a citizen, and you will see all these insurance related APIs, because that's my intent. So this is a kind of a rough segment that will get built, and this is something that you can also achieve in your API marketplaces to take the evolution to the next stage. And the most important thing that finally comes to help comes to kind of implement our needs is that quickly consume the collection, right? It's your insurance collection of your particular vehicle, then you can quickly take that collection and directly get into implementation. So that's how we jump into our implementation and kind of speed up that as well, right? So it just doesn't stop in discovery, it also kind of gives you a collection to take it to the next step and enable your business needs. Yeah, meaning I'm at just one point of the presentation. I just wanted to know if I'm on time, can I continue? And Shreya, if you could help me.
Yeah, sure. Shailaja, we are running out of time.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay. Okay, then let me then quickly summarize. So
yeah,
yeah, so what we saw is, to quickly summarize, what we saw is the API catalog, the key characteristics, and the different evolution, and how can we reach to the next evolution with the API catalog segmentation auto curation pattern based on the metadata that's available on the APIs, right? Yeah, with that, I would want to conclude the presentation, and you can reach out to me via LinkedIn and so on to kind of take it, and if you want to implement it in any of your marketplaces. And thanks a lot for listening out.
yeah. Thank you, Shailaja. It was really nice to having you.